Karen Green chairs a panel discussion with Nyameka Makonya, Siphumelele Luqwaba, and Siyandiswa Dokota to tackle perceived conceptions, limitations, and agendas that potentially hinder innovative and fruitful partnerships.
Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, which is part of the BASA Assembly partnered by British Council. I am Karen Green, the Business Arts Manager at Sabikwa Arts Centre, and I will be facilitating this exciting session on cross-sector creative collaborations. I absolutely love that this assembly is being coined not a symposium, conference, or indaba. It really leaves the space open for innovative approaches and interactions not bound by traditional conceptions of how research should be gathered, shared, and discussed. It invites all participants in the creative and cultural industries and the corporate sector to engage and contribute. So to truly achieve this, I invite you all to join in the conversation. Please share any questions or comments that you might have using the Q&A function on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook. I will be taking questions throughout the session, so please share them as soon as they come to mind. We may not have enough time to get through all the questions, but those that don't get answered during the session will be answered on the BASA website following the session. It is so awesome that digital technology allows us to engage in conversation in real time from across the globe. In this contemporary environment, the theme of the assembly, Creativity Now, Cultural Intelligence in the Time of COVID-19, is so apt and timely for us to come together to explore the role of creativity in the shifts and challenges that people are experiencing around the world, particularly in how we think about and do differently connection, culture, care, community, and collaboration. Considering models, expectations, and realities of collaboration between the creative and corporate sectors and the broader society, in essence, what the session hopes to address is framed within 3 questions. Can we achieve more equitable relations between business and arts, assuming that this is not currently or not always the case? Can other stakeholders in society play a role in building, supporting, and strengthening cross-sector creative collaborations? And if so, what is needed in order to achieve this? To tackle these difficult questions and perceived conceptions, limitations, and agendas that potentially hinder innovative and fruitful partnerships, and to explore ways that collaborations may be realized to serve the creative and corporate sectors and economies, I have 3 esteemed guests that I'm extremely honored to be in conversation with today. First, I would like to introduce you all to Nyameka Makonya, who has a long history in the corporate sector and always with a focus on community development. Nyameka is currently the CSI manager at Total SA. Nyameka, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation, and I welcome you on the screen right now with me to share a little bit about yourself and your work.
Thank you very much, Karen. It is an honor and a privilege for me this morning to join this amazing discussion and be part of this community to discuss about the creative arts. I look at myself and I think of myself as a social activist. And the reason I say that, from my very first job, I joined an NGO that was a publisher then in Scotiaville Publishers in Braamfontein. And I think really that is when I started moving up the ladder in terms of social development. I'm a Sowetan, born and bred in Soweto. And by the way, I still live in Soweto and I love being in Soweto. Over the past 10 years, I've gained a lot of experience around social development. But what is very meaningful to me and that I've learned and that I've witnessed is the fact that social development is one of the areas of industries that is very authentic. People within the social space of social development are very genuine. Their challenges are genuine. When they do celebrate and when they get breakthroughs and when they get highlights and when they share opportunities, it is genuine. So I think social development is a way to go. And I think it is a great opportunity that today we will have an opportunity to sit and debate and look at what can be done around the creative arts in order to uplift it And I think it's got a lot of potential in terms of where it could take our communities, in particular young people. I think I'd leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Nyameka. I find your passion and support for creativity and community so inspiring, particularly in the corporate sector that oftentimes requires a lot of encouragement to see the value in aligning itself to the complexities of cultural intelligence. So I sincerely appreciate you giving of your time to be here with us today. Also in the Zoom room with us today is Siphumelele Luxwaba, a social investment analyst at Chikululu Social Investments. Siphumelele has a very interesting combination of interests, experience in education and qualifications in law. I look forward to hearing more about how you have viewed and realized the points of connection in creating practical solutions to accessing justice with a focus on catalytic social investments. I welcome you on the screen with me now, Siphumelele, to give us a glimpse into what you have in store for us in this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. It's so lovely to be here, super stoked. And I think at heart, I am an educationist. Basic education is like my true love. A little bit of pressure to speak about how I've sort of found that middle ground somewhere between justice and education, but those are my two loves, education and law, and just finding better spaces for one to assist the other in justice making. In terms of the arts, I have a very professional and personal relationship. So I really have the privilege of working with the RMB Fund under the FirstRand Foundation for work and the work that they do as big lovers and big supporters of the arts. And I really have the great privilege of managing that account. And then on a very personal note, both of my brothers are in the sector. One is an actor and the other one is a musical director. So my heart continues to be in the sector.
Thank you. I can hear that it is, and I'm so eager to jump into conversation with you. I'm really intrigued by the approach and how you are merging your interests, and look forward to hearing more from you over the conversation. Thank you. But before we get to the conversation, I have one final panelist to introduce you to. Last but definitely not least, we have Siyandiswa Dokota, the production and marketing manager at Vuyani Dance Theatre. Communications extraordinaire, Sia has so much to share with us about client relations, team growth, and business development in the creative sector. Sia, thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of the panel. I welcome you to share a bit of your story of who you are and how you came into this career, creating authentic brand connections for creative and corporate companies and clients. Welcome.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks for the invitation. Wow, it's been quite a tumultuous journey, but quite an exciting one nonetheless. So a lot of, in fact, from my initial stages in my career, I had a very big interest around communicating, writing, and I always saw myself as just this person that had an entrepreneurial spirit as well, and I had to find a way of how to balance this. So I went into the public relations and marketing space, where I got to communicate and position brands. And basically, I think that is a very huge element of the work that I do, is how do we communicate a different story, a different narrative, and how do we actually let the brand shine? In my career, I have been very fortunate to be a part of a very special campaign, which I think where my love for cause-related marketing began. I was part of the team that raised R1 billion for the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital Trust to ensure that a pediatric facility was constructed in South Africa. And after we reached that target, I then had a what's next. I used to dabble in the arts myself. I was part of the, gosh, I forgot the name now. But anyway, I used to play a flute. So anyway, this interest and curiosity, it led me to Vuyani, and a very weird coincidence, you know, in the conversation, that at a point where I was actually I wanted a shift, Vuyani literally fell on my lap. And I fell in love. I fell in love with the sector. I fell in love with all the colleagues in the industry. And yeah, I'm here today having a conversation with you.
Thank you for being here with me. You present yourself with such poise and grace here. It's no wonder that you found your vocation in communications, and perhaps one might even venture to say aligned to the discipline of dance. You know, see, a lot of what you speak about, and as in written in your short bio for this program, a lot of it is about balance, which is something that is at times quite hard to find or articulate in collaborations between corporate and creative sectors. Many creatives in the industry have reservations regarding the ethics, ownership, artistic integrity, and other strings attached to corporate money. What has your experience been of securing business investments in Vuyani and best balancing the relationship between preserving the rights of the artist and promoting the integrity of the creative work, while also meeting corporate agendas, brands, and interests?
Wow, I have this conversation a lot with people that hold leadership positions in arts organizations in the community. And it's quite a privilege to work with these arts managers who are so highly committed to their work. I remember when I first moved to Johannesburg about 7 years ago, I was very impressed with the caliber of visual and performing arts available. However, beyond business, even beyond delights and pride, and I think more significantly, is that there is a part or a slice of our humanity that is touched by the experiences afforded to us through the non-profit organizations that create these works. Vuyani has been quite fortunate to have worked with people who have championed the integrity of the arts to the corporations they represent. Vuyani has not only positioned itself as a leader as a leading dance company within the cultural space, but we've gone to influence how corporate business can better position their corporate social investments, not as a token of a feel-good, but of investment in the development of the creative sector, which is currently employing about 7% of the working population. South Africa is currently facing youth unemployment, and the gap between the rich and the poor continues to expand. So I think the arts are therefore a buffer, have created a buffer to allow creative ways of creating unconventional jobs that can contribute significantly to the sector. In doing so, we've had to create a flexible business plan and a business model that can shift and change with the changes in the ecosystem, and just really open ourselves up to new opportunities of presenting and disseminating our work beyond theatrical spaces. So I must say, and you know, just highlight that we have enjoyed significant support from corporate SA with no agenda, as we've approached them not with a begging bowl, but rather a sustainable solution that can extend their investment in our company and later be able to be tracked and monitored through the impact and the relationships that we've got.
Thank you for that. You know, some say, and I think from your kind of perspective and your background in communications, and it's interesting to hear that you're saying that a lot of the relationships that you've built with the corporates, you are not finding any agendas that are hindering the creative work. Did you have to find a language? Did you have to find a common language with your corporate sponsors? Do you find your language to be more business focused than really located within the arts kind of language to really build those partnerships? Is there anything around language that you've learned through this process?
I think first and foremost is how you position yourself. So Vuyani started off as an NGO, and we realized that if we're operating as an NGO, yes, we can continue to do the good work that we do in the various communities. However, we had to walk into boardrooms as an equal. And thus we created Vuyani Dance Company, which is the entity that it's a private entity and it's a profit-making entity. So when we walk into a conversation with a corporate, already we are not there to beg. we are actually saying, let's collaborate. Let's see what magic we can actually make together. So from that point and from that angle of communication, I think people are more accepting of the work and the proposals that we bring to them, because they realize that we've researched what we're talking about, we know what we want, and we can actually, we can pull it off. So we've always seen ourselves as equals, and not there to sort of just, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that you say that, because I think it's an interesting approach and a perspective to walk in as an equal, and to provide a proposal that is well researched and based in collaboration. So what are some of the things that you offer in terms of that partnership?
So I think as a company, we have quite a variety of offerings, but I think beyond that, it's our ability to, one, sustain the organization. We have a very good sustainability plan, but I think that sustainability plan then allows us to actually to employ more people and to support more artists through the work that we do and the freelancers that we engage with. So already from that perspective, just being able to handle corporate investments in a way that we can be able to create and contribute to the creative economy, I think that's something that we've proven. It's something that I think lives and people sort of expect it of our organization.
Yeah, I was part of a webinar yesterday, and they were talking with corporates, and corporates were talking a lot about supporting companies and organizations that are focused on impact and are able to sustain and are able to give evidence. So thank you so much, Sia, for that contribution. And I'll now move on to a question to Nyameka around these ideas of profit and people and impact and investment. Nyameka, there's an apparent perception that the corporate sector prioritizes people, that the corporate sector prioritizes profit over people and planet to guide its sponsorship, accounting, and reporting frameworks. How do businesses such as Total SA, a petroleum company, define, identify, and measure returns on investment, impact, and gains?
Karen, it is unfortunate that perceptions, unfortunately, are not very easy to erase or to deal away with. However, I want to agree with Sia in saying that a lot of corporates today see the value in working with programs or projects that has got sustainability. Hence the importance these days we're pushing the public-private partnerships, and we really listen to people in terms of what do they see on the outside, because we're sitting in the inside as corporates. And all we're saying is that we've got the funding. What is that you are doing to sustain yourselves, to create employment, to deal with crime issues? So at some point, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it might have been true that corporates were prioritizing profits more than people. But I must change. There has been a 360-degree turnaround strategy, because for the fact that every corporate has got a budget, has got a particular department or division that particularly looks at social investment or social development. It means that corporates have now taken on a conscious decision to say that, what is our strategy? What areas do we want to look at? It's unlike before, where companies would be going around showing 100,000 there, showing 50,000 there, and it's a donation and they move away. One of the good strategies that Total has, we sit quite a long time. We've got long-standing relationships, particularly with our creative arts projects. I'll make an example for you. I think we've worked with Basket. Basket is a musical, instrumental ensemble that runs in Soweto. And you'd ask why Basket for 20 years? The reason is Basket has been there and they've been able to sustain themselves. The difference though is that we've seen the number of beneficiaries that have gone through Basket, that have been able to create their own careers through the work that they've had from Basket, that have been able in turn to create their own programs and be creatives and be teachers in their own right. So I want to say that we need to demystify the fact that corporates are still promoting profits more than people. I think it has turned around, and I think corporates have begun to realize that they are who they are and they're making the profits that they're making because of their communities. So if we do not work with these communities and begin to understand what their challenges are, what their needs are, and how they want to implement their programs. So hence I'm saying to you, it's now became a more public-private partnership where we would sit with a particular program and spend 2 up to 3 days and saying to them, lay on the table for us, what is your plan for the year? And how are you going to go about doing it? And I must say that one of the things that really impressed us within the creative space, I think it's one of the industries that was very fast to turn around and look at innovative ways of doing work during the pandemic. Because at some point we all thought we were going to a 21 days lockdown. The next thing we knew, it was gonna go on and it was lockdown 5. It meant nobody could do anything. But I think for me, creative arts was one of those who said, we can do this online. Let's have our audiences watch the music. Let's have our audiences listen to poetry. Let's do things online and let's start doing something. We cannot just sit. And also you must understand that with the creative arts, unfortunately, as Sia said, it's one of those hubs that really makes a difference economically, socially, health-wise, and many other things. However, they do not get, that's my opinion, they do not get as much support from our government. They do not get as much attention either, because it's beyond just supporting them and giving them funds, but it's also giving them opportunities to be on international stages, to be recognized, to be realized, and who better else to do it than our government? So I think as far as corporates are concerned, they're doing their bit. They really are doing their bit. They are trying to push. And I think also I want to, on the same breath, to commend the way our artists have gone about doing things and the way they've started to formalize things. Because one of the reasons why our creative arts were never taken seriously, from schools to communities, it's always been seen as an extramural activity. It's always been seen as something that happens in the streets as kids play. If that kids show a talent, it's well and good, the community would know. However, I think it's up to themselves, the artists, to start and making and formalizing this. And even going to schools, and we need to start demanding to schools and saying that we need arts to be part of the curriculum so that they can pick up on those talents. They can pick up on those potential learners. And it should stop as being an informal trade or an informal industry, because it brings so much more than that. So I think, yeah, the corporates have moved. Corporates are doing a wonderful job around promoting our artists.
Thank you so much, Nyameka. It really is very encouraging to hear you speak in that way and with such fondness and understanding of the role of the arts across different sectors. And you mentioned Basket, and Total SA has been a long-time funder of arts initiatives and programs. And Sibiko's Saturday Arts Academy is another one to mention.
Yeah.
What motivates continued long-term partnership? And would you say that you are seeing the benefit of this relationship extend past the direct support of the project and its beneficiaries, more broadly to even impact Total SA and its employees?
I think, like I said, for us, it's the joy of seeing the progress of the beneficiaries. The Saturday school, I think, starts as early as 7 years up to 18-year-olds. And you could see the growth. And this is the other thing with the arts. It doesn't only deal with the artistic character of a person, but you see these learners and these kids building confidence. You see them getting out of their shells and beginning to do things, beginning to be able to speak to public, beginning to be many more other things than just artists. And therefore, I think for us, seeing the beneficiaries, and once you have one beneficiary that has made it, you're sure that they're going to make an impact to 3, 4 other people. And yes, we have these long-standing partnerships with our project like Sibikwa, because we see the sustainability that they are building, but also we see the spaces that they are opening beyond the continent of Africa. We see their artists going abroad, making it, becoming big in films, becoming big on stage. And for us, that's what we're all about. And I think what also has helped is that corporates have begun to separate between an event or a marketing event and funding. Now we know that with funding, it's a long haul. It's a long-standing relationship. Whereas if you wanted to do a marketing event, it's an over-the-weekend thing that you could invite people, get them dressed in a total t-shirt and have fun for the weekend. Funding and corporate social investment is totally different. We're talking long-term. We're talking understanding your beneficiary. What are their challenges? Yes, I might be going to Sia and saying, Sia, I want to see your dancers. How can they perform? But then when Sia comes back to me and say, you know, I've got 3 of them, they can't even reach our studios because they don't have transportation. I've got some of them who wake up in the morning, they don't have food. I mean, there's issues of nutrition, and this is the reality of our country. There's just issues of unemployment. The whole household, nobody employed. So our attention has changed from saying that because we're saying we're sponsoring arts, and therefore we just want to see them dancing, want to see them singing, want to see them doing drama. We're going deep into saying, where are they coming from? What's the situation where they are coming from? And start to address those issues so that you allow them as well to come out of the shell and to start enveloping. So yes, long-term relationships for us, very important. And we're also very diverse about it. If you look at Sibikwa, it's very authentically South African in terms of the work that they do. You look at Basket, it's very Western in terms of the music they play, in terms of the instruments that we play. And we want to do that. We want to say to our kids from the townships, from the shelters, to be able to say to them, you can still play a trumpet, you can still play a violin. You're good enough. But what we need to do then, we need to make sure that we resource them enough to be able to enable them to be able to perform.
Thank you so much. I completely agree that that's really the way that the meaningful and the long-term change will happen. And there's also a comment from Nadia Virasamy on Facebook, who's also saying it's really great that Total SA is advocating sustainable funding relationships. So thank you so much, Nyameka. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit, Siphumelele, as a kind of in-between between the creative and the corporates. You know, and some research supports the fact that corporates view creatives as non-compliant and lacking in areas of sound financial and management practices, and often hinge their investment in the sector on matching funding already secured from government departments or other institutions. In your opinion, what, if at all, is the gap in communication or understanding between corporate and creative sectors? And what could both sectors do differently or better in their approach to building thriving partnerships?
Cool. So I really think we can extend the thinking around lack of understanding to nonprofits in general, because we do, the work I do is a lot with general nonprofits in the sector, but also nonprofits, right? And the driving thing around that is, you know, what looks differently. So the corporate sector, as it is today, have built all these mechanisms and systems and documents, right, that help them understand or get comfort in what an organization looks like. So for instance, instead of doing a long financial analysis on an organization, you just ask for audited financial statements, right? And a lot of that is mirrored onto their relationships with especially the nonprofit sector, but also with creators, right? They have those requests because that's how they understand sort of compliance and functionality. And I think the bigger issue really is what can bring you comfort around compliance, right? And the big thing there, and how we've been able to get, smaller organizations or CBOs across the line is transparency. So the big question is about understanding how you do your work and what it may look like, right? So we've worked a lot around bringing in, how do you do your finances, or what does your financial management look like? It may not look exactly like we're asking for. You may not have an IT 834 at the time, but what do your actual processes look like? And where we found real loggerheads is where corporate is, asking for their exact documents or their exact processes, but at the same time, the NGOs or the artists are also being quite adamant about, no, but this is how we do things. I'm just not that kind of person. We don't have those kind of systems. This is how we'd like to create, right? A bigger focus on the art itself, right? And I do think we need to start finding middle grounds about what the different looks like. And a lot of that is one at a micro level between sort of organizations or artists and their own funders, and beginning those conversations, but also with organizations such as BASA, right? So how might we start institutionalizing and creating, these new avenues for this new normal? And what does that look like? Because when we look at the bigger advocacy and moving the whole sector towards that, we would need someone like BASA advocating and putting in those systems and just showing what a different compliant also may look like.
I mean, it's an interesting concept, different compliant. I like that. And I suppose it leads me to my next question to you. In the work that you're doing at Chikululu and the relationships that you're fostering and that you're seeing grow between corporate and creative companies, what are you seeing in terms of what this different might look like?
So, I mean, at a very practical level, when we're advocating for investments in very new startup kind of NGOs, the different will always be, how might you almost look the same? So a big concern is always on financials, right? Do they have the right people in place? Are they producing audited financial statements at the end of the year? Do they have management accounts? It's always that kind of thing, right? But what you find is that, one, there's a lot of collaboration. So there's always outsourcing of your finances. This company does it for you, or sort of in a different way. Or how might you walk us through your systems? Because that's the most important thing when we're advocating to our funders is, do they have systems in place and what do they look like? And when we can't get it down is when we can't track your systems. There really is no single system that works. I can't say between a lot of the small organizations that we work with, there's similarities. The real similar thing is a willingness to participate, and two, can you actually write down what happens? And can you show us evidence that that's how it's happened in the past and that's how you'll continue doing it? So as long as you have formalized checks and balances, whatever that looks like, if we can advocate for it, 9 times out of 10, we can chat to funders about what this may look like and what they'll be receiving, right? So communication and reporting is always key. And that always gets us over the line. If you're consistently, once a month, whatever it may be, telling us, what's happening in the program, but what's also happening in the finances, then we know everything's okay, things are being tracked, and we can understand what's happening a whole lot better. So I really do think in creating these new normals, we always really push highly for communication and understanding on both parts what's happening.
So do you think that these kinds of relationships and collaborations are maximizing and articulating the full breadth of the impact of arts, culture, and the creative economy and creative collaborations?
So for me, it's a little bit of an easy no, right? And it's really surrounding, I think there is a problem with articulating impact. And an example of this is, the ECD, early childhood development sector, as we know it today, is really a function of like the past 5, maybe 8 years. Because what we knew of it before was ECD was children go to creche, they learn a couple of things, but the main focus was basic education, right? We understand matric, We understand what that means for development in the country. We understand what opportunities that gives to people. And you'd always see these one long-term, but really catalytic partnerships from funders going into this, right? Because they understand fully what the impact is. They have the research and everything. And I think that's sort of moved into ECD now, because now we understand the research. And that's why we have hundreds of millions, not only moving into ECD, but organizations being willing to expand their funding for both, let's say, basic, higher, and ECD in terms of moving funding around, right? And it's an understanding of impact. And I think the creative sector has always understood the outsized impact the arts has on the nation, but that hasn't always entirely translated to other sectors and what that looks like, right? We understand what it does for development, and as like Nyameka was saying, on health and education, all these other sectors, but it's the full breadth of that impact. It's what we're expecting it to do that hasn't quite translated into, my feeling is, into the corporate sector, right? So we don't quite have the same catalytic or hundreds of millions going into the sector. While we have nice, long-term, very understanding funders, we're not quite seeing that sort of investment. And that's because we're not quite at a place yet where we understand it's the type of impact we're looking for and how great it really can be.
Thank you so much, Siphumelele. Nyameka and Sia, are you guys able to join me on the screen now? Nyameka, would you like to?
Yeah, I would definitely agree 100% with Siphumelele, particularly on issues of financials with our NGOs and how financials are looked at by corporates. For corporates, for one company or for a partner to have proper financials, it's very vital, because remember, I get audited on an annual basis. Whereas on the other hand, I'm sitting here and as a Nyameka and a person who's worked with creatives, I understand their thinking. I understand the fact that for them, what's of importance and what is vital is to see to it that the activity continues on a daily basis, if it has to be. It continues and it's nonstop and it yields results. On the other side, I'm sitting with my accountants inside the corporate and they're saying to me, but where are your quarterly, for example, your quarterly reports? And I think it's very important for us to find that middle ground. And I think it's upon people like yourselves, myself, who understand the importance of both the two, because I don't think the one is more important than the other, but it's just the fact that strategically, it's important for every company to have their financials correct. At the same time, it is also strategically correct for our creatives to do what they have to do. So I just want to say it's a very important point that you've touched on, Pume, and I think we need to start teaching our NGOs, our creative arts out there, the importance of just being able to keep administration. I think as well, we find that our people, most of the time, they run away from administration. Nobody wants to do admin. Nobody wants to keep records of the number of learners who comes in and out. Nobody wants to record when they were not here, why they were not there. But that, for us, it's important, because for us, that gives us learnings as well, as to say, why didn't they make it? Or what has stopped them from coming? Is it a change of a teacher in a program? Are they coming more because there's been a new teacher who's younger, who's more vibrant? For us, those are learnings as well. So I want to say kudos to you for raising that up. And I think it's a middle ground that we both, as corporates, as NGOs, we need to work on. We really need to work on.
And I think that what you're touching on now, Nyameka, is some of the other areas that corporates would be looking at in terms of their criteria on how they are evaluating proposals from organizations. It was one of the questions that came up from Angelina, asking about, apart from sustainability, what else are businesses looking for? So I think you've started to touch on that, and we'll continue to talk about that. But Sia, would you like to come in at this point?
Yes, and I just want to highlight and perhaps touch on just the management and the running of organizations. I think a lot of organizations and arts organizations, they are born from artists, and those artists that are founders of those organizations end up running the businesses or the arts organizations. We decided to take an approach at Vuyani to actually, well, this is when the new team came in. We were coming from totally different spaces that were not from the arts sector. And our mandate was to grow the business. Our mandate was to grow the footprint of the business. And we allowed the people that were artists in the organization to just live in the sprung floor, in the studio, and to create and not have to worry about these administrative things. So I think in terms of building a team, it needs to be quite important for arts organizations to get the right people that are actually trained to do specific things and not just plug somebody because they are hovering around the organization. They can handle marketing, they can handle social media. I think we need to take ourselves seriously as arts organizations and put the right people in our leadership roles.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And it's actually linking to a question that's coming in from social media that I'd like to pose to you, Sia. The question is, what models of business can the creative sector apply in its own practices, particularly with regard to building capacity and formalizing administrative aspects?
So I will sort of touch on the strategy that Vuyani implements. So we have Vuyani Dance Theatre, which is the NGO sector, the heart of the organization, really. But we then realized that this baby was becoming too big, and we were getting quite a lot of attention. We were traveling quite a lot, and now we actually needed to look at Vuyani Dance Theatre as the organization that does the work. We then had to build Vuyani Dance Company, which was then there to drive the business element, to now find ways and models of how to, I want to say, augment the funding gaps. So, for example, how we work is that Vuyani Dance Company will make all the profits from the travels, from the tours, from corporate engagements, and then Vuyani Dance Theatre will hire out dancers, for example. So we pay for those dancers. So we are able to keep the funding in the organization to continue doing the good work that we're doing, along with our funders that are looking after our training programs. But we just want to be able to say to our funders that we are also working very hard to keep our training and our outreach programs going. And we are not just sitting and just running them, but we are also working very hard to be able to augment this funding gap. I think we become a much attractive beneficiary because we are working with our funder to be able to address the work that we do. I don't know if that answers you.
Thank you. It was quite a complex question, but you have answered. Thank you so much, Sia. And Nyameka, you began mentioning earlier, you were very clear in the fact that corporates are shifting and that the perspective and the kind of perception around corporates needs to shift as well. And you began mentioning the role that government needs to also come in and play. And the next event on the Assembly program is going to be an interview by Kate Gardner from the UCT Graduate School of Business in conversation with Fran Sanderson, who leads the Arts and Culture Investments and Programs team at the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts in the UK. They will be focusing on jump-starting impact investments in the creative economy, looking at innovative funding and business models and partnerships, such as blended finance, impact investing, and crowdfunding. I believe this is going to be a very interesting and informative conversation, and I encourage everyone to attend at 2 p.m. But I'm interested to hear from you, Nyameka, Siphumelele, and Sia. considering that many of these models require investment from government and the general public. From your positions in the corporate and the creative sectors and as the bridge between, do you think that more is needed to advocate, educate, and promote the value of creativity in our country? Should we start with you, Siphumelele?
Yes. So, I mean, I think for me, it's a very obvious yes. One, on looking for different kinds of funding. So, I mean, besides the fact that, there's the problem with understanding the true value or the actual impact of interventions, but also being able to open up for different schools of funding, right? So during last year, when we saw corporates moving their funds around, trying to deal with COVID-19, a lot of their focuses were on health and education and livelihoods. But what we didn't see is a lot of our own program partners were coming and saying, do you know of any other arts funds available? Do you know where we can get arts specific funds? And I think that the question really was, how do we start, reinventing so that you can position yourself in a way where it's so obvious, the line between, the arts and education, the arts and development in any type of way in the country is an obvious link, so that you're not limiting yourself to arts funding, and you can open yourself up in different ways to receive different types of education and other fundings, because that's really where the big money is. Because if we think about the type of advocacy that's needed to start understanding this true value, it is a bit of a long way off, right? And so we need to start thinking at a micro level, what might artists start leveraging off of in their own relationship with funders to start making them understand that impact and how it's cross-sectoral. But then at a macro level, definitely we need to start doing that kind of advocacy. But those kind of changes at the bigger level are going to take a whole lot more time and a couple of other levers to create that change. So we do need to start pushing at both ends to create those new perceptions of value.
Nyameka, would you like to input on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The issue of advocacy is very important. If our government is serious about supporting the arts, we need to make sure that people who are sitting in these councils, national arts councils, people who are sitting in these boards, people who are sitting in these corporations that are supposed to be promoting the arts are artistic themselves. They need to have been able to have walked in those shoes to be able to understand the struggles and the challenges of an artist. I think what's making it difficult currently is that, I don't know, I don't want to say much around that. I don't know how people get appointed to certain boards, to certain councils, so that then they're giving the accountability and the responsibility of having to disburse funds. I do not know how that happened. But the issue of making sure that within every industry, not only the arts, within every industry, we get people who are advocating for something that they know, that they understand what goes into it. I'll give you an example. One of our projects that we have done over the years, we work very closely with the French Institute. Obviously, Total, it is a French company. We therefore work a lot with the French Institute. About 6-7 years ago, the French Institute introduced to us the Fête de la Musique show, which takes place in over 120 countries all over Africa. It happens around June. We started doing it, but what it does, it's got the potential of identifying musicians, upcoming musicians that have not been launched necessarily, but that have started doing work on their own. And as Total, we're not expertise in terms of music. What did we have to do? We had to go out and find somebody who is in the music industry, who can identify these musicians. And we roped in Baseline, therefore, to say that when we send out a call for entries, Baseline would be running in front. They would be doing the adjudication of these artists. So I'm trying to say that issues of advocacy of high importance. If you, as a corporate, as an industry, as a government, if you're saying, I'm going to support a certain field, do it holistically. do it such that at the end of the day, the beneficiary is empowered, the beneficiary is impacted, not only all the other frills around. So I think it's important that we put the right people in the right position to be able to then empower the people that need to be empowered.
Completely. And also what I'm hearing you saying is talking about multi-stakeholder partnerships within the ecosystem to ensure that the change and that the growth and that the development is happening. Sia, do you have anything to add in relation to this question around the need still for advocacy and education in the space?
I'd like to touch on the government element and the support from government. Just as an organization that has lobbied quite a lot, quite recently we had our 20th anniversary, and we tried to get as much attention from government as possible, just to actually celebrate the first Black run dance company that has just shone the South African flag internationally, and we just wanted to celebrate that moment with them. But until today, I'm yet to receive an RSVP declining. So I think it's that kind of lack of interest in organizations in the sector. That's what it's sort of disheartening, where we have to go abroad to be celebrated. I first saw a standing ovation of 5 minutes in a European country, and I was just like, why does it take for other people to actually to say well done, to celebrate us as artists in South Africa? So I just think that our government really, they don't understand our industry, they don't understand who we are, they don't understand what we're doing, and they don't understand the impact of the work that our sector is doing. Something as simple as one of our productions being part of the matric assessment. When we try and take this production to schools that are teaching 4 seasons, it's very difficult to even get transport support, So it's these things that we want these children, if they're learning about this kind of work and if they're learning about Gregor Mafama and choreography, we would at least like to be able to get some assistance from government to be able to go to these schools, to be able to extend on the learnings that they've received from their teachers, and for them to actually experience these productions that they are writing about. Yeah,
very disappointing. I'm really very sorry to hear that, but I am glad that we are able to, that we are having these kinds of conversations now to try and shift that, and I'm hoping that through these kinds of engagements that we are able to find champions like Nyameka in the corporate sector, others in the national and provincial government spaces, as well as people within the creative sector and the in-betweeners between the corporate and creative sector, to really champion and take forward all the great kind of innovations and ideas that are coming through in terms of building thriving cross-sector creative collaborations. But I actually can't believe that the hour is almost up. It's unbelievable how time flies when we're in conversation with passionate people about things that really matter. And I'm really sad to see that the time has come to bring this conversation to a close. I hope that everyone who has participated in this conversation is leaving with at least a nugget of new information, inspiration, or the spark of a great idea to leverage cross-sector creative collaborations. This does not need to be the end of this conversation, and I encourage everyone to visit the BASA website for more information about the upcoming conversation and panel on the BASA Assembly program for today. You can also catch up on past events on the BASA website. And please take this dialogue and action points into your communities of practice for more cross-sector connections, conversations, and collaborations to flourish. Panelists, I would like to thank you all for being here and for engaging so authentically and openly around this subject. And I express my gratitude to BASA and British Council for making available such platforms and inviting my participation. It indeed has been a privilege to be part of this conversation and the broader assembly. I wish you all an engaging afternoon and an inspired, creative, and collaborative road ahead. Sia, Siphumelele, and Nyameka, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you guys all the best going forward, and I thank you so much for being with us.